The Bradley legislation was certainly a big accomplishment of the last session in Dover. This time around in the legislature, we saw same-sex civil unions, medical marijuana, and a big shift in the way Delaware looks at those issues. Joining us as our first person this week is State Representative Melanie George of Bear. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, the legislative session just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. What do you think the biggest accomplishment was, or the biggest accomplishments?
The passage of our civil union legislation. It's absolutely groundbreaking. We joined 7 other states that have passed civil unions and 15 others that recognize same-sex relationships. And it's really going back to our Constitution when we say that, people have equal rights. We've now made that a reality in Delaware.
This is something that's been on the radar for a couple of years, but it's been shot down every time it's come up. Why was this year the year that this was going to happen?
I credit Equality Delaware with a lot of the strength of the movement to make it happen here in Delaware, a nonprofit organization that just has a lot of grassroots support really for fighting for equal rights. And I think when we informed people, it's really an education issue. When you inform people about some of the kind of rights that folks in same-sex relationships didn't have that other people did have, it really became an issue of fairness. And most folks can appreciate unfairness when they see it. And I think once we were educated and the entire legislative body saw that, the result was the change in legislation.
Yeah, it seemed residents and lawmakers kind of came to this conclusion together. Was the fact that last year was a big election year. Is that just something that's a little bit too touchy to put on an election year? Same-sex civil unions, bills like that?
It possibly could have been, absolutely, but I do think that it was the groundswell of support from Delawareans that made it happen. And the reality of it is, even if you didn't necessarily support same-sex unions in Delaware, I think you can still be proud of the fact that here in Delaware, your legislators will step up for people who need help. And that's what we did.
Now, some of the people that are opposed to same-sex civil unions say that the next step is inevitably gay marriage. Is that on the radar here in Delaware? Is that something we're going to look at in the next couple of years?
I think right now we're so focused on celebrating the beauty and the joys of civil unions. It takes effect at the beginning of January of this upcoming year, and I know there's all kinds of amazing preparations for it, and people are really getting excited about it. We're working out the logistics of how to actually do that with all of our clerks of the peace in the different counties. So I think right now we're just celebrating the beauty of what's about to happen with civil unions.
Now, we have not had an actual legislator on this show, and I'm kind of curious, and I think a lot of people are. The people that are against something like civil unions, they have very strong-willed lobbyists. How do they get a hold of you behind the scenes, and what do they say to you in other issues such as expansion of casinos or some of the gun bills where you have strong lobbyists? How do they get a hold of you? Take us behind the scenes.
That's one of the beautiful parts of Delaware is the fact that we are such a small state and you really can run into your legislator at the local grocery store. I carry a pad of paper around with me in my purse everywhere I go because wherever I am, constituents will reach out to me and talk to me about various issues. I think email is a great way to start. If you send an email or a letter to your legislator to talk to them about your concerns about an issue, you can make a phone call. A lot of legislators, myself included, if you ask if one of my constituents wants to meet with me, I have a local Bob Evans in my district. We'll meet for coffee and we'll just talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, your concerns or your ideas. And I think that's how Delaware works.
What about the lobbyists? How do they get a hold of you?
They usually plant themselves in Legislative Hall. So when we're down in session, which is January to June, they are physically there and they'll just literally knock on our door if we're in the office and ask if they can have a few moments of our time and ask us to talk to them about something.
A bill like casino expansion, where you're talking about the possibility of several hundred jobs coming into Delaware, big issue. Why does a bill like that not even make it to the floor? It's shot down in committee. Is that a situation where some of the heavyweights in the casino industry are just too powerful for the lawmakers? Take us behind the scenes there. How do they get a hold of you individually or as a group, as a caucus or an entire legislature?
Well, I think they probably are more focused on the legislators, frankly, within that committee, and that make more of a difference, whether it's leadership or the committee members. I'm peripheral to that, so I haven't truly been lobbied that hard one way or another on the particular issue. And I think if it were ever to get to the floor, get out of committee and get to the floor, then there would be some larger lobbying going on. But to be fair, they're representing their interests. That's the way the system works, and the lobbyists will talk to the legislators. I'm not 100% certain why it was held up in committee, most likely because the committee members did not feel that it was appropriate to let the legislation out onto the House floor. Committee chairs all have different philosophies, and some committee chairs don't let legislation out on the merits, whether if they don't like the legislation. Other committees will say, we may not like the bill, we may be opposed to it on policy grounds, but we believe all 41 House members should vote on it. So it just depends on which legislator is working the committee.
All right, I'm going to embarrass you a little bit. During the civil unions bill signing, a lot of the speakers mentioned you by name, and you were called a rock star. I think you were called a rising star. It must have felt very good to know that something that you were passionate about definitely worked. Do you have other political aspirations in the future that, I don't know, do you think you can build on?
Well, thank you. It was a very humbling moment. It really was, because it was part of such a large team effort to make things happen in Delaware, and it really reinstilled in me an incredible love for the people that I work with in Delaware, and my fellow legislators and everybody for the great things that we're doing. I'm very, very happy doing what I'm doing. I'm blessed to be able to represent the 5th District and the people there, and if I could get reelected doing that again, I would be very, very grateful.
It's hard to believe, but this was your 10th session?
Going into my 10th
Going
year.
into your 10th. Mm-hmm. Wow. You must have been in middle school when you were elected.
Thank you.
All right. All right, Melanie George, thank you very much for joining us on First. We'll see you in Dover in about 6 months.